sponsored by the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. I am one of your hosts, Rebecca Whiting, and I have with me TJ Hawthorne and Harrison Hicks. Tonight we are going to discuss a couple of things. So the David Hogg and Spike Cohen debate, is it still going or did they end?
You know, I had it pulled up.
I was kind of watching it and, leading up to this, and it kind of seemed like they were winding down, but maybe they're.
I got to the Q&A part, and the first question was pretty good, and then hopped on here, so I paused it. And you can pause the live thing and probably catch up where you stopped. So
Okay, cool. So the other thing we're going to talk about this evening is there has been an article that was actually written last fall about gain of function in Minnesota. Sorry, light back on. Anyways, the gain of function is what caused the avian flu, so H5N1, and it was an accident. They didn't mean to release it, but they did. And as a result, literally millions and millions of chickens have been slaughtered as a result. So if you may remember, is the egg shortages. Remember what year? It was a couple of years ago. It was like $6 for a dozen of eggs up where we live. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's the normie impact, right? That's what impacts everybody is the price of groceries and things like that. And it just seems, I guess if we can get into it, I didn't want to interrupt. I did, but I forgot what I messed up.
It's fine. So if anybody wants to look up the article, it's a USA Today. Lab-created bird flu virus accident shows lax oversight of risky gain-of-function research. So gain-of-function research, and I had to Google to find out, because since COVID, gain-of-function, that term has been thrown around a lot, right? But what exactly does that mean? Do you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, I believe I do. I believe that there was enough talk about it because that was definitely the talk in a lot of our circles, at least, right? Because that seemed too obvious to be the source of COVID-19. And I know that a lot of folks that we listen to would get thrown off this channel for saying that kind of stuff just 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. It was underlined in that article. I wanted to write it down. Some folks are believing this way, but some folks are still believe that it occurred naturally. Like, okay, but it seemed way too obvious. And so then gain of function is, okay, you're going to create a virus that can be transmitted easily so that you can create the fight for that virus.
Right. So it's taking naturally occurring viruses and then intentionally making them more infectious.
Yeah.
And
more dangerous.
What's that?
Or otherwise dangerous, more lethal.
Right. So in that USA article, it said that they were trying to create a strain of influenza so that they could, this is what they're saying, whether you believe it or not, so that they could study it and learn how to treat influenza better. But as a result, we don't have better treatments for flu. We just have more flu and different kinds of flu now. The difference between this flu, influenza H5N1, is that it only affects birds. There have been a few instances of humans getting it, but only people who have been in very close and chronic contact with an infected flock of birds, so like a chicken farmer. But it's not something that easily passes from a bird to a person, right?
Not yet, right? That's what the gain of function, that's what they're doing with the ferrets at University of Wisconsin-Madison. That's where it all happened.
Yeah, and that's the problem with viruses and manipulating them, is that viruses naturally evolve and grow and overcome. So the viruses that you had, back then, they aren't going to be the same ones you have today.
So question, just because I haven't read the article yet.
Yeah.
Where was this gain of function research being done?
You said Madison. I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember. University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'll just read the intro to the article, right?
Okay, yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Inside the High Security Influenza Research Institute at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, 2 experienced scientists were pulling ferrets out of their HEPA filter cages on a Monday in December 2019. Another researcher still in training was also in the room to watch and learn. One by one, the animals were put into a biosafety cabinet where a solution was washed into their nostrils. It's a procedure used to collect evidence of infection. This particular experiment involved exposing the animals to a highly controversial lab-engineered strain of H5N1 avian influenza virus. The virus they were working with that day was far from ordinary, and there should have been no room for safety breach that was about to happen, but the oversight failures that followed.
So this was just in 2019 when that was happening in Madison, but at the same lab in 2013 is when it actually got out and caused the initially. Remember back in 2013, 2014 when it was actually happening, everybody's like, "Oh, bird flu! You got to step on this mat before you board the plane or before you enter this." You know, I'm sure big time farming places. I know any pet store, or whatever, you had to step on a mat before you entered whatever because of the bird flu.
Right. Well, and there's a lot of biosafety precautions, I guess, that are taken at a significant amount of farms. Like if you have a large amount of livestock, that there are just certain things that you do to, lessen your risks, because I don't know if it's more that we're just, the science is catching up with livestock and we have better availability of like blood testing animals and like doing all these kinds of things there. So you have like, and every type of animal is different, right? So your chickens are going to be different than your goats and your sheep, which are going to be different than your cows, because cows are bovine, goats and sheep are ruminants. They're a different type of animal. So we've been doing this for a while, but there's like these certain diseases that you find in livestock. So a lot of farms, especially if you're coming from another farm that has similar animals, to protect their own animals, will have you do things. Like I've been asked to not wear shoes boots that I've worn on my own farm, because people don't know, like it's just, they don't know.
That seems perfectly fine. Totally. I think that killing your whole flock, because I don't know. It never said in any of those articles, it never said how many were tested positive or whatever. They just said an outbreak, or just said a positive case, and they kill almost 1 million chickens at once. Like, I don't see, it seems like the response to the virus is worse than the virus. Where have I heard that before?
I'm looking up that particular statistic, but
there was always a weird angle of COVID, was that it was like a contradictory response, because on the one hand, you had people who wanted to push the hump forward, or whatever, I forget the catchphrase that came out of it, where
2 weeks to slow the spread.
Right, slowing the spread. But then on the other hand, there was this mania about reaching herd immunity, which was not really going to happen until everybody got infected. So it's like, which do you want? Do you want to get everybody infected, or don't you? And the delay of infection, I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but in China, they had just a huge problem with COVID later, after their lockdowns were lifted, because they locked down so hard and so fast that nobody was able to get any immunity to it at all. So when it finally did open up, it spread so much faster and so much harder that people were completely unprepared for it. And it seems like a lot of people died over there, a lot more than was necessary. I don't know. It was a weird deal. It was a very inconsistent set of messages being presented.
Well, and here's the thing with chickens, like a chicken's lifespan is very short compared to a human's, right? Mm-hmm. And also when you have chickens, when you're raising them on a commercial scale, you have thousands and thousands of chickens. Mm-hmm. And they're housed in these closed facilities where you don't have a lot of airflow. They're not allowed out to grass. I mean, in the case where you have chickens that are, are for egg production, a lot of those don't even, for their entire lifespan, they don't leave their cages, right? So it's very easy for once something gets sick, for it to be passed around in these kinds of facilities. Also, like, people are looking at the bottom dollar, right? So it's going to be cheaper, or I mean, it depends on how you look at it, but for them to be willing to cull their entire flock, they're looking at how much it's going to cost to contain the disease or contain the sickness, and then what the replacement cost is for the birds that you've lost. So if you're,
Seems like
a chicken's very cheap.
Well, it seems like an awful lot of bother when you can just make all the chickens work from home and wear masks.
There you go. Well, yeah, right. If they're not moving anyways, they're just stuck in that little hen with the hole in the butt, so they drop their eggs, and yeah, mask it up. You should have seen the stuff I seen in the airports when I was traveling through 2020 and 2021, man. I've got some fun pictures of folks in full hazmat suits, and again, it just seems like the response is worse than the sickness. But then again, it did say if humans do catch this H5N1 virus, it's like a 50% mortality rate.
Yeah.
Again,
I know, but I mean,
human made. It was made by engineers. It was made by scientists too.
Yeah.
It never had to freaking happen.
Right. And so one of the problems that they have in their facilities, that their viral or the influenza research lab, is that if somebody accidentally has an exposure to the virus, and they don't and they said this in the article, if somebody accidentally has an exposure to the virus, instead of them, they don't, the way that they take it seriously is tell the person to go home and quarantine themselves. So if you're talking about like a potential virus that has a 50% mortality rate, and you have an exposure to one of your scientists, the way that they're managing it is to send them home and quarantine at home. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that?
That was pretty much what, before there were any tests to know whether or not you had COVID and, keep you away from the hospitals. That's really what it was in the early days too, when people were getting sick. Like, well, do I just wait to die or what? And I think a majority of folks got really, really sick thinking they were going to die and then recovered, right? And it was sickness, but I think we don't have to debate, but we could, as far as who died with COVID or from COVID also, and why were the flu numbers seem to be so low in 2020. I just think the response and the media hype and all the different things with COVID were just overblown way too much. And
that was another extreme example of gain of function. You have they have these diseases, they're literally creating them in a laboratory.
Yeah. And
then it gets unleashed onto the world. I mean, I feel like to some degree, this is something that I've been thinking about in my mind, because we talk about in the Libertarian Party a lot, the NAP, the non-aggression principle.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those areas that the more, modern day, and where we have these capabilities of creating things in a laboratory. Where's this, how do you make sense of this with the non-aggression principle?
Yeah, how do you ban it? Because I hate the word ban. I can't stand anything saying ban because I can't ever make sense. But
creating diseases in a petri dish in a lab.
Right. I absolutely don't condone it. I wish they would stop, and I wish we would just all realize that this is no good. No good comes of this.
It could. That's the thing.
You create. It's like you know what comes to mind always is entrapment. You're making something up that's not even needs to be there, and now you have this result of ruining somebody's life. Like
the idea is that these viruses are going to mutate on their own. So if you do this, then you are able to see the most likely course they're going to take, and it gives you more time to come up with something to respond to it.
But if you're manipulating it through genetic therapy,
non-natural,
then that's not the natural course of that virus.
That was the first thing that the email of Dr. Fauci and in between someone that got scrubbed real quick, but it's been known that was told that this evolution doesn't happen in nature. The spike proteins or whatnot they were saying, and
that's true. They do have certain tools that they use that modify the genes in other ways as well.
Yeah, for what though? So
they
the
can
other
understand
thing
it better.
But the other thing that a lot of folks learn through all this crap is that when viruses do mutate and they do succeed to get another host, it becomes weaker, like easier to spread, but less deadly because it needs, if it kills the host, well, then how's it going to go anywhere and spread?
Right.
Well, the thing about viruses is that when it goes through, and this is how herd immunity works too. So when a virus is naturally occurring and, you have a group of people that get the virus, or maybe they don't get it, but they are, they're exposed to it. So they're not getting sick, but there's exposure. And that slow, long-term exposure also through the course of generations, mothers, when they're having, their babies and through nursing, you pass on, it's called passive immunity to your children, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why, for instance, when you have, like, talking about, when the Europeans finally came to North America and then, made that cross from the ocean and that became a regular part of life that people were crossing over that had never experienced each other's germs before.
And that close.
They were more susceptible to it because there was no slow, long-term exposure. Like, sure, people were always going to die from these diseases, but that had more to do with their own immune systems not being able to manage or handle the sicknesses that they were being exposed to, right? So you're always going to have those people. But when you as a society have grown up around it, you automatically have a better immune system because of that exposure. More so than people who have never experienced it before, and all of a sudden everybody is sick all at one time because of something that they've never been exposed to. Now, in the case of, like, for instance, smallpox, there's always some similarities between viruses, like smallpox, cowpox. There's certain things that have enough similarities but aren't the same, so that if you have one, you aren't necessarily going to have a bad reaction to the other one, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, your body's enough familiar with it that it kind of knows what it's doing with it.
And that's literally coded in your genetics. Like, it becomes part of your DNA. So if you have been able to get through a sickness without having gotten sick, it is literally coded in your DNA, and you pass that down to your children. And that's where the mRNA vaccine came from, is that they were trying to manipulate the DNA and being able to take parts of the DNA out and kind of, make it something different in other people who didn't have those genetic markers to be less susceptible to certain viruses. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
And that capabilities have only been able to start happening in the last with the invention of CRISPR. And CRISPR is a
genetic splicing manipulation. Yeah.
So that's new. I mean, they literally can take out parts of DNA and put it into something different now that has never been done before.
Yeah, I think at least America and most of the world was part of the great experiment of mRNA technology, and we'll see how they think that panned out. I don't know.
Yes. So when you're manipulating a virus in a lab and you're not allowing it to naturally occur or naturally mutate, then you're not creating a virus where people their genetics and their DNA can recognize it and know what to do with it, because it's never been.
I would disagree.
Well,
because I mean, it can
depends
only
on
be.
what you're creating, but if they're creating something that's totally different, then I mean, you don't.
Well, it's not a bigger change than the change between, for example, smallpox and cowpox. Like that's going to be a bigger genetic difference than any mutation that they're able to manage in a lab. Whatever they do in a lab, it's still COVID.
No,
It's just got something else.
no, because when you're adding things to it that it wouldn't be exposed to naturally, like you're taking things and splicing it and putting it together, things that would never ever come together in a natural way, then it is
I don't
different.
know that we could, like, the word naturally, I think, is doing a lot of work here. I don't know exactly what would differentiate between, like, what would make.
Well, first you really have to understand
unnatural.
or believe in evolution, right?
Yeah,
So,
I do.
and naturally, so you have something. So really, if you think about it in bacteria, where you have something that binary multiplies every 20 seconds or 20 minutes or something, and it will. But then you get an antibiotic that then wipes out 80% of it, but 20% of that was resistant of that antibiotic, and then it multiplies. But I mean, I don't know. I just feel like we're creating the crap that isn't actually happening. So like naturally, this spike protein that made it so susceptible to catch on to everyone doesn't happen naturally. I don't know if that's the case. I'm just using that as a thing, right? Where you have this virus.
I mean, all viruses bind to a certain protein, like that.
Exactly. This one had a extra sticky one.
Well, this reminds me of like the GMO debate. For in agriculture, now we have genetically modified, grains, corn, soybeans, those kinds of things. The difference between something that is in the field and naturally changes. Okay, so there's a big difference, because something that's in the field and that naturally evolves or hybridizes, basically. So like you have seeds and you have plants in your flowers, you have pollinators, wind, bugs, that kind of stuff that pollinates. So you have these crossbreeds of vegetables, fruit, whatever it is, that naturally occur. Those are not genetically modified organisms. Those are not. That is a natural occurrence with nature. Air, wind, bugs, crossbreeds, pollen. What you have is like apples and corn will never crossbreed and make corn apples, right? That'll never happen. Genetically modified seed has taken, I believe it's fish DNA, and injected it into like plant DNA to make it so that it is it can survive being sprayed with pesticides. So anyways, that will never naturally happen. That was created in a laboratory. Will never happen on its own. That's the difference.
Here's the thing. Now I have to come back on this, because what also probably would never naturally happen is like grafting two fruits together, right? I've heard that the lemon never would have happened naturally. It was, mixing. And I don't know how to do it, but I know some folks that do this, and in selective breeding also. How naturally was that? Now it's using nature to selective breed, but it wouldn't really happen naturally, right? Our dogs.
Yeah, but you'll never be able to crossbreed a lemon and a tomato. They're incompatible.
right now in the state that they are, but whatever type of tomato and type of lemon might be at some point in that spectrum that they could. I don't know enough about that. I'm not that.
Nope, that'll never work.
But if naturally, okay, like you said, we put fish DNA in a seed so that it's less susceptible to whatever the
The
pesticides.
pesticides that they spray in the field so that the weeds die, but the corn doesn't.
Right, and that's why you see all green fields out there in those commercial farms. They're just flawless almost always. I mean, there's watering and whatnot, but so I guess I'm thinking a little bit more about it as far as what naturally, but I do think that if the goal is to figure out something that's going to kill people, then we shouldn't do it.
Right.
But again, I'm not a fan of using
under the guise of we're trying to save you. We need to create these awful viruses so that we can figure out how to save you better in the future. Tell me when that has actually worked out to our benefit.
Where's that Batman meme? Stop. That's what we need to do. We need to be able to do that.
I'd be fine with it, but they keep leaking these things, so it's like, okay, fine. It's kind of like nuclear stuff, you know. Like the promise is so huge, it could do so much good, but then we keep having all these disasters. It's like, oh god, every single time, you know. Like,
well, and here's the problem: is that who was held accountable at that facility? Who was held accountable?
I don't know. That's a good question.
The viruses. Did anybody get into trouble? Did they lose anything? You know how many birds, chickens they've culled since 22?
Man,
82 million.
Yeah, that was in the near 100 million, and that just seems like that's huge impact.
And we haven't even started this year's season yet. That's 22. That's in 2 years. They've culled 82 million birds, chickens.
And I guess you've explained it better to me, but my initial response when I read that was that just the response is greater than the virus, but you know, I'm sure there's insurance claims involved or whatnot, and government subsidies for, you know, your loss to this. And where the heck? Yeah, exactly. Who's accountable? UW-Madison now says that they're the ones that brought this to the world. Yeah,
and they're just like, oops, sorry.
And here's the other thing: it doesn't infect wild, or they don't show symptoms. The wild birds, but that's what they say. They catch them. They catch it from the wild birds, but the wild birds aren't showing symptoms at all. Like,
and then here's the thing too, and this is something that I don't know enough about it to be able to speak on it definitively. Because I don't produce on a commercial scale, right? So what we do here is a lot smaller versus, you know, some of these chicken farms have like these huge buildings, and they're just massive buildings, and they are just the floor is just covered in birds, right? And there you can tell that it's a facility that houses chickens because of like the venting system and that kind of stuff on the outside of it. But we everything we do is outside and on the grass, right? So but I'm guessing that when they come through and they test certain birds, and if you have a positive case, the entire group is pulled. That's what I think happens.
That's pretty much what I've heard. Yeah, I think that's.
So they don't have to be having symptoms either. They
so
just have to show positive on the test.
That's putting a lot of faith in that test. I now
82 million chickens.
Yeah, and where the testing for, I don't know. I don't trust it, and I'm not saying one way or the other, but I just don't trust going to Walgreens and getting a damn test that I shove something up my nose and that's gonna know how for real. Like, I get it. If it's reactive, there is really something there, but I feel like the chances that it's bad and then makes you feel like, oh shit, no, I got COVID, or what, you know, how's this H5N1 gonna pan out too if people start getting infected?
Well, it's already driving up the during a time where I don't, this coming year is going to be hard for a lot of people because the food costs are going to change. And I can tell you right now that, we had, so this is happening with the chickens, and this season is just getting started, right? So we don't even know what 24 is going to look like because it's still only April. And Minnesota agriculture doesn't really kick off until May and June. So, we still have some time. But here's the thing that I don't know. There's the paranoid side of me that, or maybe it's just, I know too much. But so this is happening with the chickens, and this is what a lot of people probably don't see, is that beef costs are going to skyrocket this summer. They're going to go crazy because last summer you used to be able to buy a feeder calf, just a calf that you could raise for beef. It was just so you have a lot of calves that, the males, you only need the females for breeding. You only need so many males for breeding. So the males would be raised for beef. And a feeder calf this time last year cost $150. That's it. And
Wow.
You raise it.
Nick said 4 porterhouse steaks cost him $120.
Yeah, you know how much a feeder calf cost this year? $900.
Oh, that's still an increase.
That's a significant increase. That's just the feeder calf. That's not the grain or the space or the, any of that kind of stuff that's going into it. I got charged for a bag of steamed oats, which is, just basically like your oatmeal oats, for a 50-pound bag, $38 last week. $38. When I don't
even know a reference for that.
Okay, when I moved to when we started our farm in 2013, I could buy 100 pounds of oats for $8.
Holy shit! Yeah, jeez.
$8. I don't even whatever that is, the math, right?
Well, again, it's going to start really impacting. It already is. There are a lot of folks waking up and realizing that they're being impacted by, especially the price of their groceries. This is one major reason why certain markets definitely the price increases in the product. But it's what I always go back to all the time, right? Where the cost of everything is skyrocketing. But when you look at these numbers, I guess again, so we see a flock is, what do you call it when you kill them all? You have a name for it.
Culling.
Culling.
And they're culling the whole flock here and there. I didn't see, I don't know the relative numbers of how many flocks we have everywhere, right? So, so 53 million killed in the 2 years prior to this year, and this year has already been 15 million. I don't know what the total number is to really impact, but it still seems like a lot, because if you just think of 330 million people in America, we don't all have what happens if we all had our own one chicken? I don't need it. Chicken produces more eggs than I eat, but not everybody.
Chickens produce one egg every 25 hours. So not every 24, every 25.
Okay.
There's 9 billion chickens and turkeys in the American poultry industry.
See, so 53 million to 9 billion, it actually isn't that significant number,
9 billion.
So
every year, 9 billion
are born, or that's the number of.
Well, they don't live long, so.
Okay. Yeah, I guess
you can raise a meat bird from like when it's hatched as a pullet or cockerel, depending on what it is, to butcher weight in 8 weeks.
Oh, but what if it's the egg laying one? Do you keep it for longer? I mean, how?
Yeah, egg layers, they don't start making eggs until 20 to 24 weeks old. So then they're totally different type of bird. So some all livestock have, some of them are more geared for production and some of them are more geared for meat. It depends on, what breed they are. So
Sure.
chickens the same way.
Right. Yeah, I guess just the numbers, it doesn't seem to be that significant. The 53 million sounds like a dang significant number, but out of 9 billion, it's not. And so,
when it's driving up egg costs, so then why were egg costs? And remember, in 22, it was up here. It cost
Yeah, it was like
$6
$8,
a dozen.
$6. Yeah.
Yeah, and $6 was like if you were buying in bulk and getting them 5 dozen at a time. Then it was
Right.
$6 a dozen. So if you were just buying a dozen eggs,
I thought it was $8 at one point.
I don't ever buy just a dozen eggs at a time, so I have no idea. How much
I mean, I've
dozen
got
are.
chickens too, so I don't have to worry about it. I was sitting pretty through that whole thing, but yeah, I seem to remember $8
wow.
where it topped out.
And I guess the locale, the region of this called flock probably has an impact also, where these were Minnesota, Iowa, and South Dakota chickens.
Yep.
So
Wisconsin.
then it probably did have a greater effect on us.
Right.
Because
Well, and this is 22. We were just coming out of the drought to 21 also. So like there's just been
And supply chains were just foobarred and everything.
Yeah, folks like you guys that can
and crappy.
supply your own maybe weren't able to supply your own, so then you were forced to go to the market and then taken away from my dang Hy-Vee grocery market. Not just kidding.
It was me. It was all me.
It is depressing sometimes that I am I'm not a hypocrite because I don't preach this, but I would love to be as an agorist or be able to have my own stuff, but I have this tiny little lot in North St. Paul and I want to do as much as I can with it, but it is depressing when I got to go to dang Hy-Vee and spend this money for this processed shit sometimes. And
it's tough for urban libertarians. I get that. I sympathize.
I'm going to make some steps this summer. I'm grow some of our own food for sure.
You can do a lot in a small space.
Yeah, no, I've seen a lot of that. I've been following a lot of that on the social medias and figuring it out, or at least learning. I haven't figured anything out yet.
When we started doing, farm stuff, we lived in a suburban neighborhood, and I ended up with 60 chickens, 3 goats, about 20 rabbits, and a garden in my little bitty lot.
60 chickens?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. My neighbors.
Yeah, the whitings go balls deep.
Yeah, and I didn't ask permission, and nobody complained, and I just gave them eggs, my neighbors' eggs, so everybody was happy.
That's smart. You can get away with a lot as long as the neighbors have it.
Yeah, just fresh eggs, fresh, brown, and then like fresh eggs, right? They're all, but farm raised eggs are a lot different than store-bought eggs because you have, and it depends on the breed. Some breeds just lay brown eggs, some breeds lay white eggs. So the commercial breeds, they're white egg layers, obviously, because they're all white eggs, right?
Well, you can buy the brown ones too, but it's like the novelty to think that they're brown because they're cool. I don't know, but
it's just a different type of chicken.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when you crack open a legit like farm raised egg that's raised on grass and bugs and all their, the natural things chickens eat, the egg yolk in it is like this deep golden orange color. It's just totally different.
Oh, I've experienced that, and I definitely would love to have easier access to some farm raised eggs for sure. They are.
Like,
If you want to move up here, let me know. I'll hook you up.
Yep. We can. I've always thought we should just have like a free state project here in Minnesota, but northern Minnesota, we need to get away from the cities. And besides,
The chat was just saying
Nick,
that. He's talking about what was it, East Dakota?
Yeah, Nick's got the East Dakota secession movement. He's really focused. I don't know.
Does that include Bemidji? Would we be the border town? Okay. Well, then I'm all on board.
You're on easy.
Yep. I mean, we'd still have our own, people here that might have different ideas, but
That's okay. We're welcoming of all ideas as long as you don't force them on other people.
well, that's the problem is that they would.
See, but then here's the thing.
They can get bent then.
I guess how would we enforce, I guess, the secession and all that? We have limited folks in our group already. You know what I'm saying? I think there's a lot of people that might be okay with the idea, but actually moving forward and going through and executing that idea, it's a lot more to take in and get involved with.
There's a lot to think about.
I think people would be more on board with it if they saw that it was a viable solution. So, as always, my onus of action is on the individual. So, we as individuals need to start divorcing ourselves from the government in whatever ways we can, be it legal or illegal. I'll advocate for nonviolent crime. Sure, why not? And as we show that we're not insane and we're not murderous and we don't want society to just burst into flames, people will see, hey, wow, this person that I thought was insane is not actually so insane, and it works.
And
I think that's the important thing.
Right. And actually what Nick also says, nullification. And that's an important one that doesn't really get used enough, I think, in to stand up to whatever authority is above and say no, whether it's at your city level or whatnot. And, you believe this law is unjust or whatnot, and say, hey, I'm not going to enforce this. And I think, that was back in our previous episodes talking about this kind of stuff and non-enforcing unjust laws. But I'd like to take the legislative route and take away the damn unjust laws that are out there that just make everyone a criminal. Like, say you want to create a virus in your lab in your basement. I'd hate to ban that, but I sure wouldn't want you participating in that. I don't know. I like Nick's commentary today. He's always good.
He is always good.
So I think Nick was also watching the Spike Cohen, David Hogg. We mentioned it early when we started the podcast. We got 15 minutes left here. I'd hate to ban that.
Sorry. I was trying to make sure that it was working. It
sounded like it was a clip. Yeah, I got to clip that. I hate to ban that.
Yeah, we need a button. You just
no.
I hate to ban that.
Absolutely, I love to get a button bar. I really want to get a button bar. But so going back to that Spike Cohen, David Hogg debate, I guess what I took from it is what I really felt like was going to happen already. This kid's really not educated. It's the norm for folks. Like yesterday, you saw the ladies on The View talking about climate change causing the eclipse and the earthquakes and things like this, right? These are real people that folks, and we have legislators that also say this dumbest shit all the time, that they're really believe in this stuff, or are they putting on an act? That's still something that I am not totally convinced either way.
No.
Well, the American voters are not sending their best people.
No. But we don't really have we don't have a class of intellects in the United States right now. We really don't. Who is it?
They think they are.
It's true.
But they think they are because they're Harvard educated like this nitwit, midwit. That's what it is. It's I think it was Michael Malice that got me onto the term. I heard it, but I know it's used all the time. It's someone that
it really is a great one because it's just
and it's
just so dismissive. I love it.
The reality is, that's how he said it 10 times in this after Spike gave him reality. and with
Yeah.
I get excited when I talk about
He's
this.
emotionally driven and idealistic, and
Mhm.
honestly, he's traumatized, right? So,
Of course. Yeah.
all of those
And all
things
sympathy
happen.
to him for that. I mean, it's a crazy
Yeah.
thing. I wouldn't want anybody.
I'm
He's-
pretty
he's
sure the trauma
found
him
what he thinks
and
is a
all his
solution.
Hollywood shit. I bet you he's gone through a lot more trauma being rubbing elbows with the Hollywood types than that. I'm just saying.
Well, they're making a lot of money by perpetuating it for him. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a grift. It works.
Huge grift.
So
yeah.
It's
Works for
just
him.
such a solved problem, I mean, it doesn't work, gun control, and even if it did, we're not going to give up our guns anyway. So, what more is there to
Who's gonna
discuss?
come and get him?
That was
Right.
That was the first, and when they made it to the Q&A right before I hopped on here was the kid said, "So your program," and I forgot the name of it. He's got a name of a foundation that he's started and he's doing, and he said, really supports a mandated gun buyback program. So are you going to come to my door and be the first one in the stack? And I love it when he said it like that, and the first one in the stack, or are you going to send? Because during the debate they talked, Spike and David both agree about authoritarian police. At least that's what David talks about. But then again, every freaking thing he says it's necessary to have authoritarian police.
Right. The way that he gets what he wants is by relying on the state to enforce it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which again is another checkmate because the police don't actually have to defend you. We should know because I think his was Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, right? I think it was. I think it was Stoneman Douglas.
But I know what you're talking about.
But yeah, they took the case to the Supreme Court. They tried to sue the police department, as they do with every one of these shootings, every single one, without fail. They tried to sue the police department because they didn't step in, they didn't do whatever, and then the police department are like, "Sorry, get fucked." And then they appeal it. It goes up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court affirms. What was it? I forget the name of the court case.
I have no
Washington. It was Washington v. something. Anyway, it's basically the one where they ruled police departments do not have a specific mandate to serve and protect. Their mandate is to the public at large. So it's up to their discretion what they do and don't want to get involved in. It doesn't extend to the individual. So they're not there to protect you. They're there to protect some vague notion of what society is and what they think it's threatened by. And it gets shot down every single time. But most people don't know that. They don't know that the police aren't there to protect you. They want to fly their thin blue line flags and valorize them, which is, I get it. It's nice.
That's an emotional response also. It just appeals to different emotions, but emotions. It's not based in fact or reason or rationale or any of that.
I gotta look up that case. That's going to drive me nuts. I'm sure there's going to be viewers who don't know
the
about
other
it.
part that is normal when libertarians or folks that are correct, debate folks that are not. You think this, you think that. It's like we're sitting there telling you here's
Warren.
the facts, right? But all he wants to do in this, I get into this, and I'm sure you guys do too. You think this, you think like I didn't ever say this, but it's always an assumption of what I think.
When people lead off a discussion by telling you what you think,
right?
We've already lost.
100%.
Because they're not allowing you, and they're not allowing themselves to be open to hearing what you think. They already have decided what kind of a person you are.
Yeah, absolutely. You start with a conclusion and work backwards. It's like, no, let's work into this conclusion and come to it together with good faith. And that's just never the case with the commie, man. They don't have good faith. And that because their preconceived notion that we are evil with our guns. They believe that we're the evil ones.
Just for everybody's just to get this out, the court case in which the Supreme Court said that police have no specific duty to protect was Warren v. District of Columbia, and then there was another similar one. This one was a nasty one, like what ended up happening. I won't get into it, but other people can look it up if they want to. Castle Rock v. Gonzalez, which they ruled that police have no obligation to enforce restraining orders either. Yep, both very horrible situations in which the people who were failed by the police were just
right.
tossed out.
And then this becomes case law, right? This is another thing.
Oh yeah, this is well established. Well, it's been litigated over and over again, and
Okay.
they come down on the same ruling every single time. They're like, nope, this is how it is. It's not going away. It's not changing.
Because so maybe that one, okay, whatever, but many of them, when you hear precedent and case law and all this stuff, and it seems like, I've never been to law school, but I've seen all kinds of movies about, all you doing is just memorizing all kinds of different cases and then what the outcome was then. Like, maybe it was incorrect at the time, like what Roe v. Wade has then, 50 years.
They overturned Roe v. Wade.
A rediscussion. Is it simply because of the majority changed? Everyone's going to definitely look at it that way. But could it also be that the majority prior were folks that can't tell you what a woman is or whatever, right? And these folks this is exactly what I was just talking about. These folks that are in charge, this lady's in our Supreme Court talking like that. Like, is it become just the fact, we got to say the right things or else? I don't know. And they don't know what the right things are because they really sound completely ignorant. And I know I don't sound like the smartest guy all the time, but man, I could not imagine thinking that an eclipse is caused by climate change. I mean, that just seems ridiculous. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah.
My kids came in the back door, so I had to. Did they really say that though?
On The View, yeah. And then The
View, yeah.
The cicadas. The
They got
cicadas,
some spicy takes there.
the earthquakes, the eclipse. Are we ready to talk how real climate change is? Like,
Because the rotation of the moon and the earth around the sun had absolutely nothing to do with that. Clearly, though, we need new taxes to be able to. You can't reason with people that believe these kinds of things.
right.
No, just don't waste your own
It
time.
is evil capitalism. Like, I was having a discussion with a colleague today about late stage capitalism. It's like, it's not capitalism, right? We talked about this before, cronyism, right? Or corporatism, or what it's those that is not is not the voluntary exchange between two consenting adults.
So here's a pro tip.
There's a lot.
Here's a pro tip from somebody who's had a long career of debating commies. Whenever they hit you with late stage capitalism, just fire right back with early stage communism. Because that applies to, like every one of the examples of, well, that wasn't real communism. Well, it was early stage communism.
Never made it
they went to stage capitalism and maybe socialism. Never totally finished the eschaton with communism, but it was early stage. And they'll get really mad at you.
Full circle, what we're talking about, a virus. If it kills the host, then it can't spread. That's exactly what communism and socialism was going to do. It's going to kill anybody that believes in it. And then look at
it's a race to the bottom.
Everybody wanted their dang
is.
blue jeans and Walkmans, man. They wanted that stuff, and that's what drove that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have.
Don't get me started on communists.
Any final thoughts? We did cover a lot this evening.
All right, non-negotiable.
Don't engineer bioweapons if you're an idiot.
Or at all.
Yeah. You could stop before if you're an idiot, because you could add if you're an idiot to anything, right? But
if you're engineering,
I could and I do.
You're not an idiot. You're probably pretty smart. I'm just saying.
That doesn't mean you're an idiot.
Make bad decisions.
The smart people are just as prone to being idiots, and when they do, they go even farther off the rails because it's like their brain is like a 4x4 and everybody else is a Honda Civic. Like when they go off the road, they go way off the road and there's no way to get them back.
Remember in the 90s when they had all those post-apocalyptic, like
Oh yeah, Y2K,
virus?
yada yada. Yeah,
Yeah, and now we're living that.
yeah. It's great.
Although,
ahead.
again, touching grass really does help sometimes, man. If you check out of some of this stuff for just a couple days and don't pay attention, sometimes the world does look a lot nicer, right? But it's really hard to not pay attention when you know what is really going on.
Mhm.
It's like, oh no, I can't anymore. And 8-10 years ago, I probably would have called somebody crazy to be talking like I talk to some folks that I just meet.
Life was pretty good back in the day. I mean, I like to think that I grew up in probably the peak period of human civilization.
No,
Thus
that was
far.
1999.
That
That
was
was
where I grew up.
Yeah,
I'm not that old.
Yeah, I think we're all about the same age. Actually, I think I'm the oldest one here.
barely the
Probably. I'm a baby. I'm only
Young one.
34, something like that. 34, 35. I don't remember. It's a big number.
I know the way that I manage this is just like doing our farm stuff. Like I've got big plans, and it all comes back to for me independence. So
Yes.
instead of just worrying about things, like I'm actively working on ways to be less susceptible to the things I worry about. So
I dig it. That is absolutely the way. This is the way for sure. That is the way to be, where don't rely on, especially the state, but
right.
folks really.
Yeah, that'll break your heart.
Yeah.
He who controls the food controls the people. So, all right. We do have a few announcements. We have not this weekend, but next weekend. This is only one more weekend between now and convention. So if you're interested in going to the state convention and having like the party of your life,
it's
pretty
much a good time.
It is a good time, and meet lots of good, like-minded people that you'll be an entire room of people who are probably more crazy than you are. It's kind of reassuring.
There was a Republican tourist at the last convention, and she told me she had been at the Republican state convention, and I think the DNC, because she was there with Amos. Anyway, so she told me Libertarian convention is way more fun than the state for the Republicans or Democrats. Way more fun with us Libertarians. So definitely come.
For sure.
And we still have tickets available for sale on our website, lpmn.org. And I don't know how much they currently cost, but you can go and look. And it's in Duluth, 19th, 20th, and 21st of April. On the 19th, we're having a, what's it? A comedy night.
The murder mystery. Oh, yeah, we're doing a comedy night. There's also the dinner mystery. It's at the Radisson, which is a very nice hotel. I had my honeymoon there.
Yeah.
A good time was had by all.
Superior. It's beautiful. You can see it.
Yeah.
Walking distance. So
I'm
really like a rotating restaurant like the Space Needle or something. Yeah. It's crazy. It's cool.
Yep.
Oh, does it actually rotate up there?
Oh yeah. And you can see it rotating. Like where you sit, it's spinning the whole time. And I think they said it takes 70 minutes to go in a complete rotation. When I went and toured it, so
we got one at
the order dessert.
Underneath the Space Needle thing on the bottom of it is a restaurant that rotates.
Yeah, that's a cool restaurant too.
Yeah.
So also, if you want to join the party and become a member, it's lpmn.org. Top right in the website is the link for membership. And then you can also see a list of events on there for where our affiliates are meeting. And I know that there's us in Beltrami County are meeting this weekend. So
my affiliate's meeting tonight, right now. Actually, everybody's at Stouts in St. Paul, and I'm in Tulsa in Oklahoma. So
yeah. So all right. Well, see y'all next week.
Night.